Good morning, everyone from Brazil. We have today our panel following our BRICS plus ESG ADR Law Week. And this is a very special panel with a very diverse panel with people from all around the world, different time zones here. So we have Marina Gouveia, who is a Brazilian, and she's now based in Italy. She has extensive experience in mediation. Francis, Brazilian, but living in South Africa for many years. Maria Andreeva, our representative from Russia here. Thanks a lot for joining us and share your experience there in Russia. And Ati Alipour, which also has extensive experience in UN, in the US, with different language. So I think this panel will be very interesting for you. Before we start, I want to thank Lauro Parente, the CEO of Arbitration Channel, Andrea Silva, who helped us organizing this event. Of course, Fernando, Rafael, who are in the backstage here helping us a lot, and all the Arbitration Channel team who are doing an excellent work here in Brazil in spreading the ADR word to the community. So they not only arbitration, the name is Arbitration Channel, but they also foster mediation here and other ADR modalities of conflict solution. So thanks a lot to all of them. Of course, I need to thank my co-organizers, Elizaveta Gromova, my dear Russian friend, a brilliant professor in the South Europe State University, and of course also Daniela de Moro, who is a sustainability specialist, a great specialist here in Brazil. So after these disclaimers, I would like to start with our initial remarks. I'm going to start, of course, in the alphabetical order just to make it easier. So please, Ati Alipour, it's a real pleasure to be with you here and to see you again. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Hello from New York City, where it's 9:09 a.m. So I think I'm the earlier than everyone. I am the founder of Hudson Law and Mediation in Manhattan, New York. I'm also assistant ombuds at the Cornell University, where I deal with all sorts of conflicts between faculty, staff, and students. And I'm also a consultant to the United Nations, working as a conflict resolution consultant to the Office of the Ombudsman. So I deal with, every day I deal with different types of disputes, including workplace. And we, of course, have a lot of cross-cultural and multinational disputes as well, both at the UN and at Cornell, as well as my private practice. And it's really nice to be here. Thank you so much, Danielle, for everything.
And how many languages do you speak, Ati, just so the audience...
Yeah, so I speak English, Farsi, which is my native language, Azerbaijani. I also understand a little bit of Arabic, French, and German.
That's absolutely
Don't
awesome.
test me on that.
That's absolutely awesome. Thank you. So following Francis, please share your experience. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm speaking from Cape Town, South Africa. So I have a background in international relations. I'm a Grow executive. I've been in South Africa for about 13 years. I think the most important thing here is the whole path that this country went through and what do we achieve it by, especially using mediation as well. Right now, I'm a Grow executive. I've been in the export business for more than 20 years all over Africa. My background is international relations, so I'm Brazilian. I manage a family that's French, America, South Africa, with 3 kids in a country where we have 12 official languages and many tribes. So it's always very important, the mediation system here in South Africa as well. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all.
Thanks a lot, Francis. The pleasure and the honor is all ours. Maria, please introduce yourself. And I had the pleasure to be in Russia last year, and I was amazed to know that you don't have only Russian language there. You also have Tatar and Bashkir, and depends on the region. So please introduce yourself. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this event. My name is Marina Andreeva. I am a professional mediator from Russia. I am head of international mediation team in RSPP Mediation Center, and I would like to introduce you what is RSPP is. It's a Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, and it's a collection of members, consist of the biggest Russian companies, some Russian blue chips, and our specialization is business mediation, and I speak Russian, English, and Chinese languages. My professional occupation is international commerce, and I'm specialist in doing business with China. It's my major.
That's awesome to hear, Maria. Like China, for example, is the first commercial partner from Brazil. So, and of course Russia too. So speaking Chinese, Mandarin it's a very, very valuable asset. So congratulations for that. I can't understand a single word in Chinese. Just like good morning and hi. That's the farthest I go. So. Last but not least, my dear friend, Marina Gouveia, if I can call you my dear friend, it's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Canal Arbitraje, Daniela de Morro, and all the organizers of this event for the kind invitation. My name is Marina Gouveia. I'm a Brazilian lawyer now based in Italy. My background, if I may say, is mostly on the institutional side. So when I was living in my hometown in São Paulo, I used to collaborate with CBC, which is one of the biggest arbitration mediation institutions in Latin America. There I was the one responsible for the mediation secretariat. So my role was administering all those proceedings in either Portuguese, Spanish, or English. Also shadowing mediators there, taking notes, preparing briefings, and assisting in all the parties and mediators' needs. After moving to Spain to conclude my master's in mediation and negotiation, I also started mediating at the Spanish courts, at the courts of Madrid. Later, after also working with a renewed arbitration mediation institution in Madrid, which is CIAR, I also collaborate with ICC Paris at the Swiss-Italian team. Actually, I'm half Italian. Nowadays, I do live in Italy, which I think it's one of the countries that do have one of the most developed regulations on mediation. So mediation is mandatory here. I do mediate in Italian, in Spanish, Portuguese, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. So to begin with, I'm gonna follow this alphabetical order, but Ati and everyone, because when I think about the BRICS Plus, but not only the BRICS Plus, all the cultures, it's very challenging to manage, to be a mediator in a cross-cultural environment. So, and I even think about inside like domestic mediations. For example, when you talk about Brazil, just the example of our country here, we have different cultures in different regions, and people can really vary a lot. I'm gonna just make fun here with Marina. Marina's Paulista, she's from São Paulo, and I'm from Rio. People from São Paulo, they are much more formal than people from Rio. Just as an example, people from Minas Gerais, another state, they don't trust people from Rio. So it varies, and the accent varies a lot. Even Brazil is a language miracle. So we speak the same language in a huge country. So that doesn't happen everywhere. So just to put it graphically, if we have this cross-cultural problem inside a country, and I can only imagine internationally, and that's what you do here. So, Ati, could you share with us about the challenges of mediating with parties that are from different countries, that have different non-verbal language, and what do you do there? So, Please enlighten us.
Yeah, thanks. So it's always a challenge, of course, to mediate or really address any disputes or negotiate in a multicultural environment. As you know, I work and live in New York City, which is a very diverse city anyway, so we do experience that every day in addition to the international mediations. The way I approach this is that sometimes I feel like a lot of conflict resolution experts approach mediation or conflict resolution and just look at the problem. But the reality is that it's like, for example, when you want to write an essay, you always have to start with a sentence and a paragraph and then write a whole essay. So for me, communication is that sentence writing, making sure that we first understand each other. We talk about equal opportunity in mediation, and we say, okay, if you're, I don't know if that's also your practice, but it's very common in the US that when a mediator goes to caucus is 5-10 minutes with one party, 5-10 minutes with the other party. While imagine if you have a Chinese and American mediating in English, it's not the same to give them each 5 or 10 minutes. Because first of the, of course, language proficiency, but also because of the way people communicate. We have high context people, low context people who may just say something in one sentence. We had a training in Brazil, actually, in the Amazonas state, where we also had to deal with this issue that we had these gigantic companies and lawyers coming from different countries. And then we had the tribes, the local tribes who were trying to negotiate. And you can't really give them all 10 minutes. So in my practice, I try to level the field by making sure that people understand it's about sending the message across. It's not necessarily about how many exactly minutes or seconds we have, especially in a process like mediation, which is ultimately about party autonomy. I want them to know that I'm just there to moderate a conversation, that they need to just take their time to understand. And as one of my professors used to say, I always try to tell them that make the long story long. I don't want everyone to feel the pressure of giving me a short version or cut to the chase as we think sometimes is efficient. It actually can be very inefficient to cut to the chase sometimes because we miss all those kind of, behind the scene reasons for a conflict. So I try to level the field with different things, including by going to caucus. If I feel like it's really a huge difference between the way parties communicate, I always separate them. I try to have the conversation in the caucus and then bring them to the joint session and making sure that I rephrase and reframe everything in a way that's understandable to everyone. And I found that relatively efficient, especially, for example, I'm from the Middle East originally. I'm where we, for example, looking at someone's eyes is sometimes impolite. Compared to a culture like Germany or Sweden, where people, you're supposed to go with a firm handshake, with looking into people's eyes. So that puts the person in, in an intimidating position if we just give them the floor and say, there you go. So my level of intervention really depends on how I feel the parties are navigating through the conversation. And I found that usually very helpful. And of course, we can always change the culture by making sure that people understand sometimes up to 70% of a message is sent through nonverbal cues. And the level of the verbal cues and nonverbal cues that people use in different cultures is enormously different. So I try to always at least clarify that with the parties. Sometimes we just need to take a pause. Sometimes I have them, prepared beforehand by writing their briefs, by preparing for the main points, by sharing the agenda between the parties. And to be quite honest, language, culture, yes, those are the different things, but also financial situation, socioeconomics, the level of education, all plays a role. So we have to address all of those, I think, at the same time, including, of course, the cultures that are different.
Thanks, Sati, for your input. For example, just to add something, Americans, they are much more direct than Brazilians. Just, for example, in a job interview, if you ask an American, are you good at this? The person will say, yes, I am good at this. But in Brazil, for example, no, I'm not that good. People here are false humble. If they say they are good, people, oh, you're cocky. That's not good. And in the US, if you don't say you're good, then you... And in Russia, for example, people don't smile. That's not a criticism, okay, Maria? But people don't smile as much as us. It's cultural. It's cultural. Brazilians in Rio, for example, we smile a lot. But if you go to Curitiba, people are more formal, more apparently cocky. They're not cocky, but it's just the way, the culture. So it really varies a lot. And I didn't know about this staring, this look at the eye, so that I would make a mistake as a mediator here. So that's why I always say sometimes you need a co-mediator from that culture, which can read the non-verbal communication better. Please,
Yeah.
if you want to add something.
Yeah, even the firm handshake, for example. Firm handshake in a lot of countries is a show of confidence. In some countries, is like trying to intimidate someone. So having a soft handshake for Middle Easterns is very common as a show of respect, because you don't want to say you're dominating, right? Sometimes I've seen people like having two handshakes, like this, is kind of proof of like, I'm very warm. In some other cultures, it's really dominant. So imagine someone doing that as a gesture of warm welcome, and the other party gets it as, okay, this person right off the bat is trying to intimidate me. So that shuts down a whole kind of lot of things. And for co-mediation, I also agree that a lot of times different aspects, even gender, we try to kind of, if the parties are from different genders, we try to have also co-mediators from different genders when possible, to address those kind of connection and the kind of relationship issues. That's also very helpful.
Well, in Brazil, if you don't look at the eye, and if you don't have a strong, firm handshake, we're not doing business in our culture here. So that's, we cannot trust a person who doesn't have a firm handshake. So it's cultural. So Francis, you have a rich experience in South Africa, in Africa in general, which of course is a mystery for us here, in at least in Brazil, the tribes and so on. So how do you handle that? What's your experience there in South Africa, being a Brazilian, so the Brazilian culture?
Yeah, I've been traveling for about 15 countries in Africa, and it's very different than South Africa. So specifically South Africa, you have to deal, like, even when you go to mediation, they're very more formal. So if we talk with the Xhosa or Zulu Afrikaners, it's different. And, you have a lot of the tribal aspect here and the respect. So you even need to, how do I want me to address you, as a chief, as a sir, as a miss or mrs. This is very important, the formal aspect. So when people talk about Africa, I think it's depends north or south, and you had the religion. Here in South Africa specifically, you need to really understand the background. English, everybody, we will speak English, but when Ati was talking about the language and have an interpret, sometimes from people who don't speak English, they're going to speak Afrikaners, and we're talking about the same country, or you're going to speak Zulu or Xhosa, or feel comfortable to express themselves. Even that you're going to say, okay, English, it's the major language. People don't know that, but even at schools here, you're going to have all the different books in all different languages for the kids. So it's very hard to mediate here if you don't understand the cultural aspects and respect on that matter. And of course, we always gonna come back a little bit of the past that we had in South Africa, the apartheid, and it's important to acknowledge that as well. You still get to see a lot of disputes. So in the same country, you have this rich culture, but it's still a little divided. So depends on what you mediate. I'm very interested, for example, in education and schools. We have a big expat community, but I'm Brazilian, so you're gonna come with this warm. So that helps, in fact, because in general, South Africans are very warm. But then you need to remember that, okay, this is a Xhosa culture, it's Afrikaner, so you need to kind of be in the middle. So I believe that being Brazilian helps to, break the ice when you start mediation. And what Ati was saying, it's very important to give the time for people to talk, to express themselves before you really start, be that instrument they will guide better. Because sometimes when you are in a room with an Afrikaner who's more Dutch, European, even being South Africa, you see the difference, oh, okay, it's much more rigid. So it's important to not let the background, or if you have a dispute between an Afrikaner and let's say a Zulu person, you're gonna see the conflict right there, just because of this, the different background there. So you need really to understand it's not preference to the Zulu, but it's the past that contributes. So in South Africa, being Brazilian help on that matter. But I think traveling around the world for business, I'm sure Maria gonna have this as well, international trade. We learn to let them talk, understand, to negotiate, to help them to achieve what they came to achieve. South Africa is very different than Africa, the rest of Africa. It's a very unique place, and I think that's why we have big roots here in mediation during the years of apartheid, and it's still being used today.
That's a great experience, Francis, and I didn't know it was so different than the rest of Africa. So, but I experienced Africa just a little bit when I went to Addis Ababa airport. It was a really crowded airport, full of people from everywhere, and I started chatting with a person from Lesotho, which is inside.
Yes.
It's part of South Africa.
Yes, like I speak French and Spanish as well. And that helps, like when we deal with like the north of Africa, Algeria, Morocco, people speak French, and then they could see they get more approach, Ivory Coast, all this. So when people, especially Brazilians, when we talk about Africa, it's a totally different idea what South Africa is. Cape Town specifically, where I live, it's more like you have a vibe of being the south of France, because we have a lot of the European here. But when you go deeply to understand the people that lives in South Africa, you gotta have this brother was okay, it is still Africa, but then you talk to a Xhosa person, and it has a very different approach than a Zulu person or all the other big tribes we have here in South Africa. Even in South Africa, if you talk to somebody from Johannesburg, it is fascinating. Then KwaZulu-Natal, we talk about 2 hours flight. It's a totally different, because it's very formal. It's not like Brazil, when you're given the example of, Marianne being from São Paulo and from Rio. I don't like people from Rio. Marianne, I don't like people from Rio either, but that's okay. Here, it is deeper than that. So, maybe that person will like to be addressed as, I'm the chief from this tribe, so please address me as the chief. In Brazil, not saying that. So it is kind of fascinating, but it's very challenging. You need to really be present and understanding what is going on in the room before you really let people talk and feel comfortable. So being Brazilian helps in that point.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So thanks, Francis. So Maria, just to put you in the same page, people from São Paulo, they don't like people from Rio that much because we got all the beautiful beaches. That's why, So, but that's just an observation here. So Maria, please share with us a little bit of your experience in Russia, and of course your international experience with the Chinese and so on.
First of all, I would like to say that besides some cultural differences, it's a very important point that status of mediation agreement can be different in different countries, and it is what we need to take into consideration when people apply for mediation if the dispute has some international elements. I mean, for example, if there are two persons from different countries, and actually, if I have such kind of inquiries, first of all, what should I do? I should understand how mediation work in another country. For example, China and Russia has some differences in mediation procedure and status of mediation agreement. And also there are some countries in the world which does not have any law concerning mediation, so they don't have an official status of mediation agreement. Some countries, they have mandatory mediation for some type of disputes. And I think it's very important to clarify this question. And it is very often if people need to have official status of mediation agreement, we should invite mediators from another country and conduct mediation together and sign mediation agreement together. So that's why we draw attention to make a kind of a chain or cooperation with mediators from all over the world. In order, if we have dispute, we can invite a mediator from another country. And about mediation in Russia, I would like to say that mediation agreement, if it is certified by notary, it has a status of enforcement document. So in case of some part, in case of one part doesn't execute the obligations, then you can go directly for enforcement without any court procedures. And there are not so many countries which with the same high status of mediation agreement. But we also should take into consideration Singapore Convention, because it's it should work, I think, all over the world and make our mediators' job easier. But for example, as for Russia, Russia did not sign the Singapore Convention, so we don't have this instrument for our job. And besides these questions with different status of mediation agreement, there are also big cultural differences, language differences, and also we should know what will be the language of mediation. If we can conduct mediation in English language, or we should invite interpreter for mediation procedure, and the level of interpreter should be very high, because we should be able to understand all the nuances of parties and mediator. And for example, even high-level translators and interpreters sometimes have mistake. For example, it was a funny situation on very high-level meeting in 2009 when it was a meeting in Geneva. Hillary Clinton met Russian Sergei Lavrov, a minister of foreign affairs, and when they spoke about resort American and Russian relationship, they pressed the button, but the Russian interpreted this resort not the right meaning. He interpreted it's like overlord, but not resort meaning, because words are very similar. So these examples show us how important to have a right translation to understand the meaning of parties and meanings of mediator. And of course, we should understand if the parties' culture are egalitarian, hierarchical, like in China, for example, when people who are junior, they cannot express their opinion as open as people from egalitarian cultures can express themselves. We also should be able to understand a different attitude to time scheduling, because for some cultures it's not very important if you are in time or if you are late, but some countries can be very serious for these questions, and many other things.
Maria, for example, Brazil, you talk about being in time or not. But for example, giving Marina our domestic example here, but people from São Paulo, they will be always on time. and people from Rio were famous for never being on time. For example, if you schedule a party in Rio, like, oh, be at my place at 8 o'clock. People from Rio will arrive at 9:30. No one will be at 8. Even the owner of the party won't be ready at 8. So he expects not to. If you arrive at 8, there will be no party at all. Just an example here how different things are. In São Paulo, they will start planning the party 6. Everything will be ready at 7, and you have the party 7:30 ready, and people will arrive at 8. So that's it. I made a meeting recently with Chinese, with an arbitration center in China, and they sent me the meeting schedule. Like, for 5 minutes, the president will talk. For 2 minutes, someone else will talk. You have 3 minutes, and that never happens in Brazil. Like, Brazilians, first we will chat a little bit and talk about soccer or something else, and then after that, after creating some reports, we will start this. So the small talk is important for Brazilians, usually. So let me jump to my dear friend Marina. Marina, you are having a multicultural experience in your practice. So, for example, I can only imagine how you do mediation with Italians who are so dramatic, are famously dramatic, and that should be hard. Like a divorce, family mediation with 2 Italians, that shouldn't be easy, So share a little bit of your experience here, please.
Thank you, Danielle. Yes, Italians do have strong feelings, and I think we can jump on that on a later moment of this session. I reckon all the ladies' findings. I feel all those struggles also in my practice. So, as Achi say, you have to recognize and address any asymmetries, being that a language asymmetry and a power asymmetry. I think that also the mediator role, the mediation function, is to put both parties on the same page, giving them the same opportunities on the mediation. So also, for instance, I will delve a little bit on the first answer on my practice, on my experience mediating in Madrid, mediation in Spain. So in the Spanish courts, they do use mediation for diverse matters. So they do criminal mediation, which is something that we do not do at Brazil. Even here in Italy, is not that well developed. They use mediation also for domestic violence and also for multicultural issues, including multicultural divorce. So, for instance, I had an opportunity to work on a case while I was living in Madrid. That was an in-person case in which we had a child abduction issue from a couple that was divorcing. He was Spanish and she was Greek. And she took the child with her to Greece and never came back. So I was in the room in person with the dad and online with the mom. The mom barely could speak Spanish. I do not speak Greek, unfortunately. So happily, the core that I used to work in Madrid in person, they had some kind of partnership with a master's degree, the master's degree that I went through, that I was enrolled. And luckily, we had a student that was coursing that master's in mediation, that she was Greek and she could speak Spanish. So even more suitable than having an interpreter, I would say it's having a mediator that could speak both languages and give equal opportunities to both parties, and let parties express their in their own language, because words carries meaning, carry sentiments, carry opinions. So I think that's very important. But that was just a point that I want to make to complement all the ladies' ideas. Also, I would say that it's very important, Danielle and everyone, to address and feel how parties approach the mediation process itself. So there are some cultures where mediation is quite value. So common law jurisdictions, parties, lawyers, they really take the chance to mediate and find a solution I do believe that in Germany is quite like that. Switzerland as well. They do have a mediation culture. But most nations that are going through a development, that are on the development stage, we do not have that culture. And sometimes mediation is perceived as a sign of weakness, or even as a strategic in order to gain time, or even worse, gather information from the other side later to be used on a defense, on an arbitration or a litigation. So I would say that is obviously mediators, they do not have to have a preconception of the party based from where the party comes from, but they should be aware of any misinterpretations or any preconceptions towards the mediation itself, and also to address that on mostly in private sessions. Also, more on the lawyer side, I would say it's very important also to understand what was their previous experience with mediation. How is the process built on the culture that they come from? So, for instance, in common law jurisdiction, I know that many, and I work mostly on business case, shuttle mediation is a thing. But then in Brazil, we go mostly for joint sessions. So also to address that process building and understand the needs and the expectation of the lawyers and the parties upon the process. Also, common law jurisdictions, we have 2 days booked entirely in order to find a solution on that mediation window, let's say. And they really take that opportunity. They start that since the morning and go to when is needed on that day in order to find a common resolution. In Brazil, no. And also in Spain and Italy here, we do have more open, fluid proceedings in which we have more than one meeting. So sometimes even meetings with a spacing between of about 2, 3, 1 month, so 3 weeks or 1 month in between those sessions. And sometimes also parties, they in between sessions, they got, I don't know, they got other ideas about the conflict, and that changed it all. So changed the perception of the parties towards what it was built upon inside the mediation. So those would be the first takeaways that I would like to put in order for us to start our conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, having a good interpreter, it's essential in the mediation session. I have a good friend, a mediator here in the south of Brazil, and she told I told that to Ati yesterday, but she had a mediation session with 2 deaf people and an interpreter. She said it was very, very challenging, and that's, you have to mediate with sign language, which is, it's very hard. And so, and that represents what we're talking here today. Sometimes you have to mediate without even the verbal language. And you also talk about mediation in domestic violence. And for example, in Brazil, I've seen some police officers saying that, like sheriffs, they said that, oh, I do mediate in the police station. And I always say, oh, you cannot mediate with the gun on your waist. That's not mediation. That's, a symbol of power. That scares people. That's not, but, in Brazil, we have great professionals and people that really respect the mediation proceedings, the steps and everything. But a lot of people still confuse mediation with conciliation, or just like talking to people, and that's not it. That's not what we're talking about here. So just to proceed, Ati, could you share with us a little bit of your experience, UN and this multicultural environment that you live, which is New York City, and of course with your background, have you ever mediated in different languages, for example, speaking Persian and English at the same time with 2 different parties? Please share your experience in practical cases.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, US doesn't have an official language. English is the working language, but the courts in New York are supposed to provide a translator to whoever needs an interpreter. So I've had cases where we had interpreters. Interestingly enough, I've had cases where parties did speak fluent English, but they just used the interpreter in order to delay the process, which was sort of really abusing the power they had, but that's another story. I have had mediation in Spanish, of course, and I think I share the sentiment Maria had towards the translators and sometimes that not being accurate. I've had that experience that one party says something very simple and the other party just exploded, which seemed to be a little bit of, missed in or lost in translation. So I think in my experience, especially if I have the same language, I speak the same language as one of the parties, I always try to bring all the parties to the language that is kind of equal to everyone. Let's say if there is an American, there is a Spanish speaker, I kind of want to make sure that we kind of balance that field or level the field for everyone. But I think another matter which is sort of related to both language and also the legal systems is that majority of mediators, I don't know if everyone here is a lawyer, I'm assuming most of us are lawyers. One of the other challenges is that we have different understanding of ethical kind of roots. What is ethical, what's unethical? For example, in Italy, and I think Marina can correct me if I'm wrong, ex parte communication with a judge, which means like the attorney going talking to the judge from one party, is something acceptable. In a lot of countries, it is. In the US, that's like the ultimate corruption anyone can have. That's like a deal breaker. If I ever hear that someone's attorney went and talked to the judge, first of all, the judges would never accept that, but even that attempt looks really bad on the party who's doing that. On the other hand, I believe in a lot of European countries, and most of the countries, I suppose, they do not prepare the witness. They expect the witness to show up in the court and just and speak their mind based on what their recollection is. In the US, if you do not that you're supposed to, if you do not prepare the witness, you're not a diligent attorney. You're supposed to prepare your witness. So imagine someone who thinks that, okay, I'm going to prepare the witness before the court, and if this is a mediation coming from court, of course, that one party is going to take it very differently. And I think a lot of misunderstandings happen, and we think ethics are common sense. Turns out common sense are not that common. So that's one of the areas that I always try to touch base and make sure that we do get to the root of the problem. And someone says, I don't trust this person, because we know if parties trust each other, they're going to work it out themselves. They may not even need a lot of intervention. But when parties don't trust, it can be stemmed from things that I think I'm doing something very basic, very normal. The other party may take that as an insult, or maybe taking that as fraudulent behavior or being untrustworthy. So I think clarifying those is very important. But the reality is that language barrier is a big challenge. And for that, I think a lot of times if the mediation, especially if it's commercial mediation, if we need really a lot of numbers to be calculated and then delivered, I think pausing mediation would really be helpful for the parties to go prep, really, sleep on the information they receive, make a decision, sometimes sending in writing. And interesting enough, it's not just about language, it's also introverts and extroverts, right? Written communication for an introvert versus an extrovert is totally different. They prefer written, communication in detail, and as opposed to an extrovert who would be really taking over the session. So if I ever feel like for language reasons, for cultural reasons, for personality reasons, one party is taking over, I think the best thing is a pause. And if I want to give you an example, actually, I've had cases in the UN which were kind of referred to us by the tribunal from The Hague. And in those cases, I've seen that even having an agenda in some cultures is such an important thing. Like you were saying, the differences between Curitiba, Rio, and Sao Paulo, I feel like the same in here, like New York and Los Angeles have different cultures, of course, fundamentally different cultures, I would say. So I feel like for a mediator to really spot those, understand those, or help the parties to navigate through that is really important. And language barrier can really make things 10 times worse if parties are not even able to understand. So even delivering an apology in some cultures, some languages, is just something that I've had cases, court cases, where someone apologized and the other party, which was actually from Latin America, took that totally as an insult that, okay, they don't want to give me what I want, they're just presenting themselves with the nice, buttering me up, basically. So I think it's important to understand the differences between language proficiency, competency, also the way that words are used. The way that each language may use certain words in certain way. I've had cases where someone was fluent in English, used the word mislead as opposed to you didn't give me right information. Mislead is a much stronger word, but they thought these are synonyms, right? And do they even, synonyms, do they even exist? A lot of, language experts believe that they don't, and I believe they don't exist either. So I think it's very important, like, to spot those differences, to make sure that also simplifying whatever is there to make sure that it's kind of a very common understanding as much as possible. But pausing, going back to writing is always also very helpful, in my opinion.
Thanks, Satya. Amazing experience. When I first went to the US, just an example of different meanings and understanding of some words, of some expressions. As a Brazilian, when you tell someone an achievement, for example, I just published some paper elsewhere, I just won some prize or something like that, a person usually says, like, congratulations, I'm happy for you. But Americans, sometimes they say, for example, good for you. Good for you. And for a Brazilian, that's like, oh, I don't care. Good for you. It's not for us. If it's not for us, so I don't care. So but it's regular. That's normal. Good for you is like congratulations or something like that in the US. So just for a Brazilian, that sounds very, very strange. That's so cultural understanding the other person culture is, and you only can do that when you live in the place. That's when I lived in the US, I realized that I understood the Americans a lot better. If you're just a tourist, you don't understand the culture. That's what I'm saying here. Go ahead, Ati.
Yeah, good for you. Actually, in Farsi also, it's sort of a sarcastic way of saying that, why do I care? But here, yeah, it's actually compliment. I totally agree. And in terms of also behavior, different kind of people of different cultures also behavior-wise are very different. I had a colleague who came from Saudi Arabia and lived very long time in London, and then went to Los Angeles and was saying that everyone likes me here. I feel like I'm super popular. And we asked, why does he think that? He said, all these girls in this Starbucks keep asking me, how's my day going? I like your jacket. And they thought that this is kind of sort of a, like a language that shows they're very interested. While in a city like LA or in California in general, it's very common to kind of share a lot of compliments, take your time. But when you come to New York, bam, 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 everyone wants to just move forward. So going from a culture similar to New York and London, then going to a city like LA, being from a country like Saudi Arabia, which is very similar to culture where I come from, where people try to reserve a lot of compliments, especially for a different gender, that sort of can be a problem as well. So I also want to say that I remember when you mentioned the difference between Sao Paulo and Rio. When I went to Rio, I didn't get your permission, Danielle, but I'm going to say that when I was talking to Danielle, he took a very long time to talk about Ipanema, which I was fascinated by. But then we talked a long time about the Brazilian barbecue, which was very interesting to me. And then I realized that this is actually part of Danielle's business proposal. Like when he's talking business, the barbecue, the beauty of, Ipanema, all that is part of the culture, which was very interesting to me because I never had that experience before. And I mean, in general, I'm fascinated by Brazil, but that was also a very nice, welcoming way. And I just genuinely felt like when, Francis mentioned a warm and welcoming environment, I think certain people having that kind of aura of being very welcoming, very warm, actually helps the business and helps the mediation as well. So sometimes mediators can use those skill sets as well.
Actually, I was just being a good tourist guide, not business there. But you loved so much Ipanema Beach that I was actually narrating what it was and how it worked. So, but it's beautiful. Rio, we have our downsides, but it's very, very beautiful city. Francis, we're talking here about experiences and the practice of mediation. What have you experienced in South Africa or even in Brazil that you can share with us, please?
Well, I was, we're talking about communication, and one thing that I find I think it's very important here in South Africa to see is, like, even before the communication, it starts when you arrive and you see the parties, it's just to see the balance of power. We are in a country that we have a lot of gender bias as well, and race. So just when you do like business mediation, I think it's almost a conception that, oh, okay, the company gonna win no matter what. This mediator is not really working for me, because there is, this observation that's very important to take in practice. Another important aspect here is, I guess, mediation is seen a little different than other countries, as Marina was saying, more developed in terms of like Italy or Spain. So you're always gonna have a lawyer present as well. And sometimes I think the lawyer because didn't have the training how to be a mediator, on that details before even the parts talk, to understand who's in the room, because you're going to have this race empowerment here in South Africa, because it is part of the culture, if you understand how South Africa really works. And if it's a woman caller, you really going to need to start to understand that is going to have more emotional as well because of the past. So all these aspects are important. So it's not even just a translation in that point. It's not just, even if they speak different languages here, being South Africa, it's the past that carries. So I think the mediator needs to really, and not being South Africa sometimes can be a little challenge, because Brazilian, as you can listen to Danielle speaking, it's such a multicultural country. It's not like we don't have racism in our country, but it's different than a country like South Africa. So those parts are very important here, observing these details. So if you have, a man and a woman, and you see a woman that's like causa, it's different, not just different gender, but here women are really put a little bit lower. And you see not just that, but it's like a Black woman, you need to understand and even put this in a perspective, even before you talk. To really go, okay, let's understand what's going on, because the imbalance of power starts there. So sometimes you need to give more time. So what Ati was talking, timing is important, but give more time for the person to maybe calm down and understand that's a different situation. Let's put everybody in the same level to talk and give the opportunity. So I think South Africa, you'll find this very interesting. So as much as people don't like to refer to the past, it's very important to understand the history here, to really put our perspective. It's not just the communication, the language, but it's to read the room where you are. And even sometimes it can happen because if you're a woman, maybe, the part's not going to feel comfortable. We would prefer to have a man. So that happens, I think, often for what I've been observing as well. So not being a Brazilian sometimes might not help very much in that case.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah, that must be very challenging. And you like in Brazil, you're a Brazilian too, but unfortunately we still have racism here and sexism, and it. So sometimes you have to deal with that in a mediation session. So of course Brazil is very advanced in terms of legislation. So racism is really a crime here in Brazil, and of course we have special police stations for domestic violence, and so we're advancing, but we still have a long way to go. So Maria, what you can share with us about your practice, not only in Russia, but of course with international business, with the Chinese, and what can you tell us about your practice? I was checking here in the Singapore Convention, as you mentioned, only 18 parties have ratified the convention. Brazil has signed it, but didn't ratify yet. Near Russia, you have Kazakhstan, who has already ratified it. But if you compare with the New York Convention for arbitration, for enforcement of arbitration of foreign arbitration awards, you have 172 parties there that have ratified. But I have hopes that the Singapore Convention will move forward quickly, so we can even get the advantage of a hybrid dispute resolution clause and solve the dispute in mediation, for example. And of course, otherwise you need to validate the mediation agreement in an arbitration award, which also works, but it's not the best way to go. So Maria, please share with us your experience.
Russia has not signed Singapore Convention yet. Not only hasn't ratified it, so we has not done the first step. So I don't think that it will be a question of some recent decades. And what's about my experience? I would like to also speak about one situation when one woman applied for mediation. It was a family case, and she asked me to invite a man for co-mediation, as a woman's status does not enough high for her husband, and he would not listen to female mediator. So she asked me to invite a man for co-mediation. So it's sometimes it's not only some cultural differences, but sometimes it's also difference between. Is it okay? Because I see some chat.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Yes. So sometimes it's also some differences maybe between male and female attitudes to mediation. And I would like to tell you about some communication styles, differences which we can meet in negotiations, in mediations. For example, there are some direct and indirect cultures. I'm not sure what is a Brazilian type of culture, but I know that Russian type of culture is a direct culture, and we can speak openly, and usually our language is a concise language. We can speak directly. We can say no if someone does not feel interest to something. Sometimes our face more seriously than other nations, and we can be very focused on facts, on data, and usually we expect if some agreements are written, that these agreements will be fulfilled as they are written. And but there are some indirect cultures, especially in the East, and the communication might be opposite, especially if we speak about East Asian countries. And sometimes it's very difficult for not experienced Russian to understand what they mean, because they avoid to say no, and they use some different ways how to speak no. Sometimes during negotiations they speak like yes, but later, or yes, we would like to do, but it's very difficult, we need some additional time, so something like this. And actually in their culture it means no, but for people of direct cultures it is difficult to understand, and read under the lines might be very difficult, and it might have some misunderstandings between people of different cultures, because direct cultures, they might look rude for indirect cultures, and indirect cultures, they might seem very complicated for direct cultures. And if you conduct mediation, it's very important to understand that for direct cultures, if agreement is signed, people have expectation that this agreement will be fulfilled like it is signed. And indirect cultures, for them, signing a contract, it like beginning of negotiations, of one of the steps of the process of negotiations, and they always expect that in the future they can adjust it, change it, or do something else. So it's very important to make both sides understand what attitude they have, what expectations they have. Yes, I think so.
Maria, what you're saying is amazing, because I have an experience to have a lot of Russian friends. And, you know, as a Brazilian, especially as a person from Rio, the direct Russian way was, you know, very amazing, because we Brazilians, we don't say no. Oh, okay, let's do it, but later, something like that. And the Russians are like, "Niet," and with like a poker face. And we're like, oh, what's happening here? You know, as a Brazilian. And you Russians, please correct if I'm wrong, but my perception is either you are a friend or you're not a friend. There's no in between that. So Brazilians, we're like, of course, we have our inner friend circle, but we try to, laugh to everyone. Everyone's a colleague, everyone, you know, especially like in the workspace. So Russians, they are much more direct. And in that way, the Americans are like that too, you know. So when I was like in managing positions, I found some difficulty sometimes with people who were hierarchy below me, because sometimes I'm too American. And when Brazilians, they feel like I'm too direct, like Russians and Americans sometimes, because I just want to give a quick message. I don't want to give a speech before giving the message, because our time is precious. So that's, but into Brazil, sometimes that's not good. You need to, before giving a message, but you are great, you have these qualities, but you know, this you could improve. So stuff like that. And Russia was amazing to me. Like, for example, in the airport, in Moscow airport, the airline guy was, you know, checking my luggage there, and the airline guy, he just gave me my ticket, my boarding pass, and said, "Oh, here's your boarding pass. Your gate is there. Bye-bye." And I was like, okay, bye-bye. It was like, to a Brazilian, I never want to see you again. So that was but the guy was just doing his job, you know. So that would never happen in Brazil. Like, just, you know, okay, your gate is there, but if you want, you can have a cup of coffee right there and be so very welcome to our airline or something like that. But please, Maria.
Yes, you are right. Actually, I don't know what to attend, but I think that you are right, because yes, it's sometimes when we speak that someone is our friend, that means that this person is very close to us. And for people who are not in this inner circle of friends, we have some another words, not friend. Yes, this is right.
But that's different, you know, it's different culture. Yeah. You don't see, it's very, very different. Like, we say that Latin people, like Brazilians, Italians, and Spaniards, and people, we are warmer. But that's not a criticism, but we're warmer. Like, we hug a lot and we kiss. Everyone is our friend, and, you know, but that's not the Russian way. So that's culturally very, very, very interesting. And I was observing a lot when I was in Moscow, and And when I was in Kazan, total different culture. Like half of people are Muslim, half of people are Catholic. So they speak Tatar and they're very proud of being Tatar. So you have different cultures in Russia, which amazes, a Brazilian, for example. So jumping to my friend Marina. Marina, what can you share with us? Any, once I was talking to a good Italian mediator, Giuseppe, and he's from Napoli, and he's specialized in divorce, family mediation between Italian and Brazilian couples. And he told me that, when you get a divorce, when you separate, that's when the culture clash comes with all the strength, and I can only imagine, for example, like a Persian with a Brazilian, or like a Russian or something like that. The cultures are very, very different. So Marina, please share your experience in Europe, Brazil, wherever have you been elsewhere.
Thank you, Daniel. I would just build upon what you were talking also with Maria. I would complement saying that Brazilians are afraid of confrontation. And here in Europe, although we came most of our Latin American culture is built upon Portugal, Spain, and Italian cultural aspects, they are not afraid of confrontation. They are not afraid of not sounding nice to the other side. So sometimes, and that I not as a mediator, obviously, but I learned the hard way that even for people to respect you, sometimes you have also to put a bad face and say no equally. But that's something cultural. So in Brazil, we have a say that the client's always right. So even if you go to business, they will do everything to please you. Here in Italy, no, they do not do that. And sometimes I even go laughing and doing some jokes with my husband that sometimes they look that they do not want to earn money here. So sometimes you go to a restaurant and you see that is a table there that is empty and you didn't make a reservation. And if it was in Brazil, they would say, okay, come in and enter. That is no problem. And here in Italy, also in Spain, that happened to me a lot. In Portugal, no, if there is someone that made a reservation, you won't make that people wait when they arrive, even though if they are 5 minutes late. So what is right for them, and they do not have any issue telling you no. So that's also something that we have to understand. They are not there to please you. Being that said, and that was supposed to be my last point, but that's a very informal chat, so I would just jump to that, as I think will make more sense. In Brazil, I feel when I do mediate within Brazilian private institutions, I do that quite a lot remotely from here. I prefer using caucus, using private sessions, using shuttle mediations. So sometimes people are afraid of being a joint session and damaging the relationship even more. So I always start with separate sessions, private sessions. Here in Europe, I feel that sometimes as an inaugural session, a first session, it's beneficial to use a joint setting. So people to see the other side in the proceeding, recognize the other side in the proceeding, and feel that that's something serious. And they are here to solve that together, which sometimes makes things worse on Latin American cultures. Also, one of the first things that it caused me some surprise when I moved to Spain, which was the first country that was living here in Europe, was that I was always working at arbitral and mediation institutions. So I was the person sending all those invitations for people to decide if they want to participate or not on the mediation proceedings. And in Brazil, the rate of response and acceptance was quite low. So, for instance, 30% of people were accepting to participate of a first meeting with no cost, just to understand what mediation is. In that institution in Spain, I would say that 80% of people were accepting with no cost to participate on a preliminary meeting just with the secretariat of the chamber to hear the mediation or to say, like, to explain what it is. So people were more open to the possibility of mediating. That also followed in France when I was working there, and I feel that's something also that happens in Portugal and obviously here in Italy, where mediation for a first session is mandatory. Then also something that I noticed is that in Brazil, of those 30% people that were accepting to participate on the first session, mostly they had escalation clause on the contract, putting a mediation stage. And was very rare those parties that came together with a request, a joint request with no clause to mediate, that they came to the conclusion that mediation was a tool that was there to help them. So I also co-authored an article some years ago, I don't know if Daniel will remember, about the success rate of mediations with a clause and mediations without clause. That those mediations where the desire to mediate was expressed in the moment that the mediation initiated. In those cases, they do have a success rate much higher. So that's something that we observed. And something that I can tell you is that from those 80% of acceptance in Spain, I would say that most of them were without clause, were people just willing to take a chance. So I see also that openness. So on the first sessions that I conducted, I was quite reluctant. I thought I wasn't writing the emails well, that I was keeping some important word, that I was the one lost in translation. But no, it's just a more open approach to hear without a compromise, just to understand what is that. So being that said, I think the ladies also cover many of the aspects, and I will let Danielle pass to move on to the next question. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Just for non-Portuguese speakers, you talked about Portugal, Marina. And in Portugal, for example, we speak the same language. Yeah, for start, they colonized Brazil, we speak the same language. Yes, sort of. But they are much more literal than Brazilians. For example, if you arrive in a restaurant and you ask the waiter, do you have salt? In Portugal, he'll say, yeah, I do. And he won't bring the salt. You have to say, can you bring it for me, please? In Brazil, if I do have salt, yeah. And the guy will just bring it. And the language, the cultural difference, and even the language difference. For example, I have a good friend who has an autistic child. He speaks very good Portuguese, and of course, and he also speaks very good English with British accent. And when I was with him, he said, please speak English with my son because he understands better. Because Portuguese gives the room, the language gives the room for a lot of sarcasm and irony. So our language is full of sarcasm and irony, especially like people from Rio, we are very sarcastic. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying it's a reality. So, and English is more straightforward, which I believe, for example, Russian too. And Maria, in Russian, for example, my perception as a foreigner, I can be very wrong here, but it's like you're always, when you're speaking, looking for a rapport from the other person, acknowledgement, because you always finish your sentence with da, to see if the person's following up. And you sometimes people transfer that when they're speaking English. So they say, oh, so that's it, right? Yes. So they put the yes at the end of the sentence. Am I right here, or do you use that also in mediation? Like the da is a regular component in your sessions, just to see if people are following up?
I think it's not always. It's a kind of English questions which might have the end, like, isn't it? But not always.
Yeah, but that is very used in Russian, so that's. But have you ever, for example, mediated a dispute where between like Russian or Chinese party, where the cultural clash was so big that it was impossible to reach an agreement because of that?
I have never faced the situation when we cannot reach an agreement because of cultural differences, because I think that the personal interests are the first, and cultural differences are like a sauce for a dish. So first we should look at the personal interests, and sometimes there are so big difference between personal interests that you cannot find a compromise or a win-win decision for them, and they cannot come to negotiation. But if it is only cultural difference, you can explain. And sometimes the Chinese they can how to say wrong understand Russian direct manner of speaking and communication. And once I accompanied a Chinese delegation here in Russia, and they will wonder why Russians don't invite them for lunch, for example, or for a dinner. If you go to China, Chinese people, they are very hospitality, and they always invite their guests, even if they not very interested in cooperation, but it's like a tradition, and they very often invite guests for a dinner or for lunch, something like this. But here in Russia, if you are not partners, and if you are not a prospective partners, say, for example, it's just a company who come to Russia to make some offer or for some acquaintance, usually Russians don't invite this type of business guest for a dinner or for lunch. I think it's a cultural difference, and Russians might invite you as soon as you became a partner. And once one Chinese man told that Russians invited us for a dinner because they went to China, and now they learn how to meet guests. So the understanding of culture was wrong, because Russian company invited them for a dinner because they became partners. But the Chinese people, they thought that Russians before had never invited them for a dinner, because Russians did not know that guests should be invited for a dinner. So I think that usually cultural difference, they are very important, and it is very important to explain why this or that might happen. But it is not a barrier for agreements or communications or cooperation.
Yeah, in Brazil, if you arrive here, Maria, people will invite you for dinner on the first day to have some beer, and that's the Brazilian culture. And that amazed me, actually, when I lived in the US, because like people, they really keep an arm distance. They don't invite you to their place unless they really trust you, like their home. Like in Brazil, we're very open. Oh, come to my place, and like after 1 week, come to my place, let's drink some beer or whatever. And that doesn't happen in Brazil, of course, in other cultures. So, but Ati, talking about the preparation and to cross-cultural mediation, or what can you tell to people that are starting in mediation right now, and how to prepare? What should they study, and of course, how to prepare a session so complex in that way in your experience? What do you do? Like, tell us your secrets, Ati, because they are working, so we want to know.
Yeah, thanks. So I believe one of the main challenges is that when we are dealing with a complex situation, people overly prepare in advance, which causes them to have a lot of, preconceptions before they even enter the mediation. So they know that these are the points that I want, these are the points that the other party wants, these are the points of compromise. And then I've seen like they even look up the other party, look up the other attorney, try to see what their cultural backgrounds are, and everything like that, which seems to be a positive, but I think sometimes it's actually not that helpful. When Marina mentioned that when there is a clause, there's a higher chance of parties coming to mediation, it's very similar in divorce. I was recently working on something that basically some family law attorney mentioned that basically the parties who have a prenup, which means they are prepared for a potential problem, they have higher chances of having successful marriages, which I can totally understand as a mediator, because I believe when you expect that there may be misunderstandings, when you expect that there may be differences in the way we look things, as opposed to, no, this is how I want to see things, and this is the other kind of parties. For example, when Maria mentioned that inviting to a dinner or not inviting to a dinner is part of the culture or not, it means they already have an opinion. I think having opinion is really the big problem. I know that is perhaps repetitive for most of you, but that major kind of story of like orange story, right? That a mom had an orange and then wanted to cut between the two kids because they were fighting over the orange. The mom, being so fair, cuts it in half, and then sees that one of the kids is making orange cake, so it doesn't even need the fruit, or needs just the peel, the zest, and the other son is having the orange fruit. So had the right questions been asked, they could just have 200% of basically what they had. So what we call expanding the pie, right? So there's an orange 100%. Now we need 200%, more needs than what the resources are. So I think in all mediations and all conflicts, that's a challenge. We want more than what we have, but sometimes the problem is that we don't exactly know what we have. The creative solutions are sometimes being underestimated. And a lot of times, right now I have a case that I was dealing with another attorney, actually also in the US, but the case is partially in Europe, partially in the US. And it's a kind of a very complex, multinational, kind of different regulations. And when we were talking to the attorney, she said that in good conscience, I can't even take this offer that you're sharing to my client. In the US, especially in mediation, we say that it's not even up to the lawyer. They have to take the offer. It's just about how you take it, right? So she said, ultimately, I'll take it. I can't advise my client. Sorry, I think can you still see me?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, for some reason, I just stopped seeing you all for a second.
No, for us, it's my image and sound perfect.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah, so when I was talking to that attorney, she already knew what's good for the client. And I said, how do you know? This is a package deal. Maybe you take it to the client may say, okay, this is not as important to me if they give this option to me. So one of the things I say to parties to prepare is that don't think about this is the first thing that I want and I'm going to go negotiate. Always think about the range and always think about what is it that you really want to gain out of this if the other party compromises at A, B, C, D point. And I think the biggest problem in preparation for mediation is that everyone looks at things from their own standpoint. It seems a cliche, but it's true. A lot of times we only look at things from our standpoint, and the way we deliver that is what we want. People are not interested in what I want. There is a book that I'm reading right now. There was a very interesting example. It says, if I like strawberry shortcake, but I'm going fishing, I'm going to take a worm. I'm not going to take strawberry shortcake because the fish doesn't like that. So do you think about what you like, or do you think about what the fish is going to like? Which is, yeah, I don't eat worm for breakfast, but I want the fish, so I have to take the worm with me. So the same with mediation. I always tell the parties that when you're preparing, think about what are you offering, not just what you're asking for. Because a lot of times people only think about, this is good for me, this is bad for me. okay, what are you telling the other party so that they see that you also cover their point of view. And it's the same for even job interviews, even in sales methods, right? When you're selling something, if you keep talking about why your product is good, it's not going to be as effective as saying why you need my product, what interests or what needs you have that my product is going to respond to. So the same in mediation, when parties come up with solutions, I always tell them that give them like a, I'm a holistic ombuds. I consider myself a holistic mediator as well. I always say, listen, look at it from a bird's eye view and see what is it that will work for everyone. Why should they even accept what you're saying? When you're offering something, first think about it. If I were in their shoes, what would be the incentives that I would accept? And sometimes they do actually come up with those incentives. And then they kind of think about, maybe I present it totally differently. Maybe from, attacking the people, we attack the problem. Maybe from talking about, and again, it sounds cliche, but people don't look at mediation as collaboration. They look at it as leverage, as kind of a session. They come to use their leverage. But I look at it the way that, this is a collaboration, and there are ways that at best I know 50% because I only know my side. So I'm going there to learn. So opening that kind of mindset to learning, to not having the prepared over preparation or prepared agenda, I think sometimes helps as well.
Thanks, Satya. Absolutely perfect. No, I would be the whole day here talking with you. It's very interesting to learn from you and all your extensive experience, but I now have to open for the final remarks. So I'm gonna start with Marina. Marina, please, your observations, your final remarks about this webinar, about mediation, a cross-cultural environment, and of course we talked here about the BRICS Plus, but the conference about the big BRICS Plus, but we're talking about the whole world, because that's what the BRICS Plus are going forward to be. Like, many countries are there into it, and Arabic cultures, Africa, Ethiopia, and Middle Eastern countries, and of course South America, Brazil. So that's what we need to talk about here when we talk about cross-cultural mediation. Please, Marina.
Thank you, Daniel. And what a joy to be here today. I myself learned so much with Ati, Maria, Francis, about the tribes difference within the US, also with China. So what a great event. Thank you, Daniel, again, for putting that together. In summary, I would say that my quick advice for someone, a mediator in the task of mediating culturally diverse participants, will be present, be at the moment, don't infer, don't make assumptions on the parties culture. Every country has its own diversity, as we were talking here the whole day. I would say also to recognize and, more importantly, address difference, disbalance in power, in even in their whole relationship as well. So address those issues as well. Being that on a caucus, which is more easily, or on a gen session, if you feel that you do have the space as a mediator. And most importantly, after all, be flexible. Always be flexible. So always tailor the proceeding to the needs of the participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Thanks for joining us. And always a pleasure to see you again. Hope to meet you again in Europe, as we did in Vienna 2 years ago. Francis, please, your final remarks, and thanks for sharing your very, very rich experience in South Africa and the whole Africa, actually.
Oh, well, first, thank you so much for having me. I mean, that was an incredible experience. I learned so much about Brazilians as well. Sometimes I don't feel I'm so Brazilian. I think people from Rio are different as well. But it's very, like, Ati, Maria, Marina, like it's incredible share experience. I think the most important thing that I love it is this combination of all the experience and backgrounds everybody have here from all over the world. But I think I was just listening to Ati and Marina. Maria talking about something that summarized for me, it's empathy. Like when you go to the session, and Marina just said, be present. And I would say our own bias when we arrive, like put aside, think about the interests of the people, that they understand their emotions. I think it's always important to navigate with the flexibility that Marina said, their emotions, make sure everybody understands, like, we're here to find the best. Sometimes it's not a solution, but it's the best for everybody. So I really like this perspective, this holistic way, as Ati was saying, to understand people. I think one of the great advantages that we have about technology in the times of AI and mediation is this. It's, work with empathy and the best. So thank you very much for having me. And I would like to invite everybody to come to Cape Town. And I promise to be very Brazilian. Everybody can stay at my house, because that's what Brazilian do. And welcome you guys with a Brazilian barbecue. And Brazilians, we invite and you can come. That's the way we are.
That's a very good invitation, Francis. It's a place I never went, so maybe someday we can put together a mediation event there, so everyone here has an excuse to go and eat some Brazilian barbecue at your place. So please, Maria, your final remarks from my dear Russia.
Okay, I am very glad to meet all of you and to know more about Brazilians and mediation in Brasilia and mediation between Brazilian and other countries. It was very interesting for me, I don't know.
Don't be so direct to Russia in your final remarks. No need to be so direct.
I think that by the end, if we speak about the steps we should do in mediation between different countries, what we should check, for example, if we can have a checklist of the checklist for international mediation. Of course, we should clarify many things about, as I told you before, it's about mediation status, languages, time zone, and status of mediation agreement in all of the countries, and what kind of virtual mediation platforms or what kind of platforms we can use for mediation, about translations, languages, and everything should be very clear for both sides, and especially we should understand if we should invite a mediator from the second country or from this cultural area, or we can conduct it by ourselves. So I think that's all what I would like to tell you.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for sharing your experience from Russia with us. So last but not least, my dear friend Ati, please.
Thanks again. I just wanted to thank Danielle for being so patient, explaining the process, everything to us to join this event. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, Maria, Marina, Francis. You'll see us in Cape Town. And it was really a pleasure to talk to you all. I know we spent over an hour talking about the differences, but as someone who is originally from Iran and now in the US, I can tell you that the similarities are more than the differences. So sometimes we just need to bring the attention of everyone to the fact that we are, at the end of the day, we are members of the human race, living on the same planet, sharing a lot of things, all of us together. So focusing on that would be also helpful. And it was really a joy and pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ati. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Maria, Francis, Marina. It was a very, very, an awesome pleasure to be in this panel with only amazing ladies who share great experience in mediation. And thanks for joining, so I hope we can be in other events together, and always count on me here in Rio, in Brasilia. Now I'm living in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. And I hope to see you in your home countries too. And thanks a lot. So that's the end for today.